deliberately recognizes that the longer any good is in operation, the worse it is for sustaining cyclical consumption and hence the market system itself. In other words, product sustainability is actually inverse to economic growth, and hence there is a direct, reinforced incentive to make sure lifespans are short of any given good produced. And in fact, the system cannot operate any other way. One glance at the sea of landfills now spreading across the world show the obsolescence reality. There are now billions of cheaply made cell phones, computers, and other technology, each full of precious, difficult-to-mine materials such as gold, coltan, copper, now rotting in vast piles, usually due to the mere malfunction or obsolescence of small parts, which, in a conservative society, could likely be fixed or updated, and the life of the good extended. Unfortunately, as efficient as that may seem in our physical reality, living on a finite planet with finite resources, it is explicitly inefficient with respect to the market. To put it into a phrase, efficiency, sustainability, and preservation are the enemies of our economic system. Likewise, just as physical goods need to be constantly produced and reproduced, regardless of their environmental impact, the service industry operates with an equal rationale. The fact is, there is no monetary benefit to resolving any problems which are currently being serviced. At the end of the day, the last thing the medical establishment really wants is the curing of diseases such as cancer, which would eliminate countless jobs and trillions in revenue. And since we're on the subject, crime and terrorism in this system are good. Well, at least economically, for it is employing police, generating high-value commodities for security, not to mention the value of prisons that are privately owned for profit. And how about war? The war industry in America is a huge driver of GDP, one of the most profitable industries, producing weapons of death and destruction. The favorite game of this industry is to blow things up and then go and rebuild them for profit. We saw this with the windfall billion-dollar contracts made from the Iraq War. The bottom line is that socially negative attributes of society have become positively rewarded ventures for industry, and any interest in problem resolution or environmental sustainability and conservation is intrinsically counter to economic sustainability. And this is why, every time you see the GDP rise in any country, you are witnessing an increase in necessity, whether real or contrived. And by definition, a necessity is rooted in inefficiency. Hence, increased necessity means increased inefficiency.
The American dream is based on rampant consumerism. It is based upon the fact that mainstream media, and especially commercial advertising, all corporations who need this infinite growth have convinced us or brainwashed most people in America, and hence the world, that we have to have X number of material possessions and the possibility of gaining infinitely more material possessions in order to be happy. That's just not true.
So why do people continue to buy in this way, which is ultimately eco-genocidal in its systemic effects cumulatively? And it just is classical operant conditioning. You simply put inputs of conditioning into the organism, and you have outputs of desired behaviors or goals or objectives. And it has all the resources of technology. And they boast about how they get into the minds of infants. What they hear is already making them conditioned to the brand. Then you see, well, that's how people have been such fools. In a way, they've been taught to be fools. It's a value system disorder.
You know, if there is any testament to the plasticity of the human mind, if there is any proof to how malleable human thought is and how easily conditioned and guided people can become based on the nature of their environmental stimulus and what it reinforces, the world of commercial advertising is the proof. You have to stand in awe at the level of brainwashing where these programmed robots known as consumers wander the landscape only to walk into a store and spend, say, $4,000 on a handbag that likely cost $10 to make in a sweatshop overseas, only for the brand status it supposedly represents in the culture. Or perhaps the ancient communal traditions which increase trust and cohesiveness in society, which have now been hijacked by acquisitive, materialistic values, where now annually we exchange useless crap a few times a year. And we might wonder why so many today have a compulsion to shopping and acquisition, when it is clear that they have been conditioned from childhood to expect material goods as a sign of their status with friends and family. The fact is, the foundation of any society are the values that support its operation, and our society, as it exists, can only operate if our values support the conspicuous consumption it requires to continue the market system. 75 years ago, consumption in America and much of the First World was half of what we see today per person. Today's new consumer culture has been manufactured and imposed due to the very real need for higher and higher levels of consumption. And this is why most corporations now spend more money on advertising than the actual process of product creation itself. They work diligently to create a false need for you to fill, and it happens to work.
You know, economists are in fact not economists at all. They're propagandists of money value. And you'll find that all their models basically get down to token exchanges that are to the profit of one side or both sides or whatever, but they're completely disconnected from the actually existing world of reproduction.
In Ohio, an old man failed to pay his electric bill. You may be familiar with the case. And the electric company turned off the electricity and he died. The reason they turned it off was because it wouldn't have been profitable for them to keep it on because he didn't pay his bill. Do you believe that was right?
The responsibility really lies not on the electric company for turning it off, but on those of this man's neighbors and friends and associates who are not charitable enough to enable him as an individual to meet the electric bill.
Did I hear that right? Did he just say the death of a man caused by not having money was the responsibility of other people, or in effect charity? Well then, I guess we're going to need a whole lot of infomercials, little miserable coin slot donations for bodega counters, and a bunch of pickle jars for the billion people now starving to death on this planet because of the very system Milton Friedman promotes. Whether you are dealing with the philosophies of Milton Friedman, F.A. Hayek, John Maynard Keynes, Ludwig von Mises, or any other major market economist, the basis of rationale rarely leaves the money sequence. It is like a religion. Consumption analysis, stabilization policies, deficit spending, aggregate demand. It exists as a never-ending, self-referring, self-rationalizing circle of discourse where universal human need, natural resources, or any form of physical life-supporting efficiency is ruled out by default and replaced by the singular notion that humans seeking advantage over each other for money alone, motivated by their own narrow self-interest, will magically create a sustainable, healthy, balanced society.
There is no life coordinate in this whole theory, this whole doctrine. What are they doing? What are they doing? What they're doing is tracking money sequences. That's all it is tracking money sequences, presupposing everything that matters. One, that there's no life coordinates. Wow, no life coordinates. Two, that all the agents are self-maximizing preference seekers. That is, they think of nothing other than themselves and what they can get most for themselves. That's the notion, that's the ruling notion of rationality. Self-maximizing choice. And the only thing that they're interested in self-maximizing is money or commodities. Well, where does social relations come in? It doesn't, except in the exchange to self-maximize. Where do our natural resources come in? They don't, except to exploit. Where Does the family come in as being able to survive? It doesn't. They have to have money in order to purchase any good. Well, shouldn't an economy deal somewhere with human need? Isn't that what the fundamental issue is, to satisfy human needs? Oh, need isn't even in your lexicon. You dissolve it into wants. And what is a want? That means money demand that wants to buy. Well, if it's money demand that wants to buy, it's got nothing to do with need, because it may be the person has no money demand and desperately needs, say, water supply. Or it may be money demand wants a gold toilet seat. Well, where does it all go? To the gold toilet seat. And you call this economics? Like, it's really, when one thinks of it, it's got to be the most bizarre delusion in the history of human thought.
Now, so far we have focused on the market system, but this system is actually only one half of the global economic paradigm. The other half is the monetary system. While the market system deals with the interaction of people gaming for profit across the spectrum of labor, production, and distribution, the monetary system is an underlying set of policies set by financial institutions which create conditions for the market system, among other things. It includes terms we often hear, such as interest rates, loans, debt, the money supply, inflation, etc. And while you might want to pull your hair out listening to the gibberish coming from the monetary economists,
modest preemptive actions can obviate the need of more drastic actions at a later date.
The nature and effect of this system is actually quite simple.
Our economy has, or the global economy has, three basic things that govern it. One is fractional reserve banking, but banks printing money out of nothing. It's also based upon compound interest. When you borrow money, you have to pay back more than you borrowed, which means that you, in effect, create money out of thin air, again, which has to be serviced by creating still more money. We live in an infinite growth paradigm. The economic paradigm we live in now is a Ponzi scheme. It's nothing grows forever. It's not possible. As a great psychologist, James Hillman, wrote, the only thing that grows in a human body after a certain age is cancer. It's not just the amount of money that has to keep growing, it's the amount of consumers. Consumers to borrow money at interest to generate more money, and obviously that's not possible on a finite planet. People are basically vehicles to just create money, which must create more money to keep the whole thing from falling apart, which is what's happening right now.
There are really only two things anyone needs to know about the monetary system. 1. All money is created out of debt. Money is monetized debt, whether it materialized from treasury bonds, home loan contracts, or credit cards. In other words, if all outstanding debt was to be repaid right now, there would not be $1 in circulation. And 2, interest is charged on virtually all loans made, and the money needed to pay back this interest does not exist in the money supply outright. Only the principal is created by the loans, and the principal is the money supply. So, if all this debt was to be repaid right now, not only would there not be $1 left in circulation, there would also be a gigantic amount of money owed that is literally impossible to pay back, for it does not exist. The consequence of all of this is that two things are inevitable: inflation and bankruptcy. As far as inflation, this can be seen as an historical trend in virtually every country today, and easily tied to its cause, which is the perpetual increase of the money supply, which is required to cover the interest charges and keep the system going. As far as bankruptcy, it comes in the form of debt collapse. This collapse will inevitably occur with a person, a business, or a country, and typically happens when the interest payments are no longer possible to make. But there is a bright side to all of this. Well, at least in terms of the market system, because debt creates pressure. Debt creates wage slaves. A person in debt is much more likely to take a low wage than a person who isn't, hence becoming a cheap commodity. So it's great for the corporations to have a pool of people that have no financial mobility. But hey, that same train of thought also goes for entire countries. The World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, which mostly serve as